Lucy looks so good that Arthur actually asks Seward, like, are we sure that she's really dead? Jonathan gets very anxious, and Mina gets worried for him. She follows his gaze. Good old Count Dracula is out and about, living his life in London town. She's going to have to learn what happened in Romania, and she decides to read his journal. She is going to be proactive. She's going to be ready no matter what, just in case, and I love her for it. Van Helsing writes to Mina asking if he can come visit. Again, he's just trying to put the pieces together about what happened to Lucy. Van Helsing and Mina meet. Mina is one step ahead, and she has already typed out her journal. She just gives him the papers. Mina gives Van Helsing the typed up copy of Jonathan's journal entries. He leaves, reads it, and winds up writing to her later that night saying that as strange and terrible as it all seems, it's all true. Another newspaper article, this one is talking about children who are mysteriously going missing in the middle of the night, claiming that a beautiful lady lured them away. They also have 2 pinprick marks in their necks. So Van Helsing just has to come out and say it, that the marks on the kids' necks were not caused by the same illness that Lucy had, but they were in fact made by Miss Lucy. And speaking of people who are going through it, Van Helsing then announces that he wants to get some backup. They need to include Arthur and Quincy as well. Hello world, welcome back to my Dracula vlog. We are now on installment 6, which means we have made it over the halfway point. Things are picking up. We saw some more vampire-y action in the last installment, and we're gonna see even more of it today. This is gonna be a pretty big video. A lot of important stuff happens. I'm excited. I hope you're excited. Let's not waste any more time and let's just get right into it. At the end of the last installment, we saw Van Helsing convincing everybody to go along with his vampire hunting plans. And so chapter 16 starts off with Van Helsing and the boys going to Lucy's tomb in the middle of the night. They open up the coffin, and of course, Lucy isn't in there. And now Seward is familiar with this routine. Arthur and Quincy are of course shocked at this, and Quincy even asks Van Helsing if he caused this. Van Helsing assures him that he didn't. And then Van Helsing explains to Arthur and Quincy his and Seward's past experiences in the cemetery, seeing the pale figure, helping the kid out. They then leave the tomb, and Van Helsing seals it with a paste made out of the host, the Catholic traditional wafers. He mentioned that he has special permission to use it all the way straight from the Vatican, the Pope himself. They lie in wait in the cemetery, and it doesn't take long for the pale figure to return, again holding a poor child in its arms. And as it drinks the child's blood, the men realize in horror that that pale figure is in fact their dear departed Lucy. She spots the men watching her and tosses the kid aside because of them kids. And Seward notes in his writings that while it's clear it's Lucy, she does look different in her vampire state, crueler, more cold-hearted. And then Lucy tries to beckon Arthur to come closer to her, and he starts to walk towards her, but then similarly to when Lucy was on her deathbed, Van Helsing jumps in between them with the crucifix, literally making room for the Holy Spirit. Lucy recoils in anger, and she tries to run to her tomb, but she finds that she can't enter it because Van Helsing has sealed it with the host earlier. And Seward describes her expression as she looks back at them with the phrase, if looks could kill. Her looks might not kill you, but her fangs might. Van Helsing then asks Arthur if he has permission to proceed in the plan that he described earlier, that Arthur was so taken aback by. And Arthur is now like, yeah dude, go for it, please and thank you. Van Helsing removes the host paste from the tomb, and Lucy escapes into it. With it still being nighttime and Lucy still having her vampire powers, Van Helsing says there's nothing more they can do for the night, and they leave the cemetery. Oh yeah, the kid is there. They gotta get that. Again, they leave it somewhere that they say it will be safe, and go back to Seward's hospital for a sleepover. The next afternoon, they all return to the tomb, and of course, Lucy is back. Van Helsing gets out his tools, and now this is where Van Helsing really starts to do his Van Helsing-ing. He then explains the lore. How vampires are immortal, they need to drink blood to survive. If you get bitten by a vampire, if you die, you then become a vampire yourself. If the vampire who bit you is destroyed, then you're in the clear. And so once they put an end to Lucy, all the kids that she has bitten will be saved and will go back to normal. And then also Lucy herself, her soul will be saved. Then Van Helsing asks who's gonna have the honor of actually doing the staking, and everyone looks at poor Arthur. Their reasoning is that because he loved Lucy the most, and was going to be her husband, he should have the honor of basically saving her soul. And I get that, but also you would think like this poor man has been through enough. The trauma of staking his beloved would be a lot. That's just me. But Arthur accepts the tasks and he assures Van Helsing that he won't falter, and Van Helsing is like, you best the F not. No, I'm just kidding. Van Helsing calls him a brave lad. As Van Helsing read from the Bible, a prayer from the dead, Seward and Quincy just kind of stand there chilling, I guess, and Arthur completes his duty. Vampire Lucy screams and writhes and foams at the mouth, but then she goes still, and it's clear that they have succeeded. The men even observe that Lucy's features seem to go back to normal and she looks sweet again. They're very thankful to Van Helsing. He gives Lucy a kiss, and then he and Quincy leave the tomb. And then Seward and Van Helsing complete the rest of the task, which again, a reminder, it's putting garlic in her mouth. And they all leave the cemetery, but then Van Helsing tells them that the work is not yet done because they need to now hunt down the vampire that did this to Lucy. I like to think this is when they all have like a hands-in moment. Go vampire hunting team! And then Van Helsing tells them that they will have 2 more friends that will be added to the team who will be arriving in London soon. And that brings us into chapter 17. Back at his hotel, Van Helsing gives Seward the Harker's diaries and tells him to study them, that it has very important information there. He has to get going, but Mina's coming in on the train, so Seward goes to the station to pick her up. When they meet, Mina mentions that she knew who he was based on Lucy's descriptions, and then it causes kind of an awkward moment between them. At the hospital, Mina joins Seward in his study and sees his phonograph, and when he mentions that that's how he keeps his own diary, she's amazed by it. And it's actually a really like cute moment because she gets very excited and she's like, oh, I want to hear it say something. But that causes another awkward moment because of course the only thing that Seward has recorded on it is his own personal diary. Realizing this, Mina then asks if then, instead of anything personal, she just really wants to hear the accounts of Lucy's death, both for closure and information's sake. But Seward is horrified. It was such a terrible experience. He doesn't want Mina to be exposed to that. And he tries to lie, but does a really bad job of it. He tells her that he wouldn't be able to play for her the recordings about Lucy's death because he wouldn't be able to find that specific moment in all of his recordings. And then he's like, oh wait, that's actually true. Mina is a tough cookie and asks again to hear it. Seward is adamant no, she can't hear it. He's aghast at the thought. His reaction confirms Mina's suspicions that Lucy's death was caused by Dracula. And she says to Seward that she gets his hesitation because he doesn't even know her, so how could he trust her with this information? But she knows he's been given her diary and Jonathan's diaries and assures him that once he reads that, he'll know that she's up for listening. And swayed by her determination, Seward comes around and allows her to listen. So he moves the phonograph to her room and she sets up her typewriter and she begins transcribing. And she works very hard. They even have to push back dinner because she's so in the middle of it. And then after getting through the first half or so, Mina then goes to visit Seward in his office and tells him how amazing the machine is because not only was she able to just get the information, but she was actually able to hear his tone, his voice, his actual anguish with the whole experience. And it was very moving for her. Seward then makes a comment that no one else should hear or even know what was in his diary recordings. And Mina says that other people must know what was on them. This again catches Seward off guard, but Mina gives him this rousing pep talk about how if they're gonna defeat this evil monster, everyone's gotta be on the same page. Everyone has to know all of the information possible. They have to share their knowledge. They have to trust in each other if they are going to win. Again, Mina is on it. Not only is she smart, but she also just drives this team. She's like, suck it up, Buttercup. We need to defeat this thing. There can be no secrets, no missing info. And Seward's like, okay, I guess, keep going. So then after dinner, Mina resumes her transcribing. She gets to the point where it describes Lucy's death, and you know, she's sad, but also driven by it. I mean, if something like this happened to my best friend, I would be, there is nowhere that Dracula could hide. It would be game on. Send him crawling back to his musty ass Castle Romania, end him, burn that place down, break open every single box, use his own coffin box as a stake. As she does her transcribing, Mina is using a special paper, so she's able to make multiple copies at once while she's writing. So not only is she smart, she is efficient. She also remembers in Jonathan's journal that he mentioned when he gave the paper to Van Helsing, and Van Helsing read it and looked shocked by it, and she's like, I wonder what that was about. I'm gonna look into that. And again, efficient, on the ball. And she's like, we not only do we need to know our personal experiences, we need to get other writings involved. And that's when she starts looking into the newspaper articles. So the one about the beautiful lady that was terrorizing the kids, the one about the wolf that escaped, the one about the ship. And so it's kind of then that you realize that everything that Mina's working on is the book, everything we've read so far. So that's fun. And so of course this is now even more information that she's got to look into and include. Then she says what is maybe my favorite line of the book: I am not sleepy. Now, in my head, my interpretation of things, I like to think that this is a loving but direct call out to her husband and his napping tendencies. Not only does he go into a forbidden room, he decides to sleep there. So after this failed attempt at help, all hope is lost. Jonathan Harker takes a nap. And then Jonathan Harker does what he does best and falls asleep and takes a nap on the bench. It just makes me laugh. We then shift POV to Seward's diary. He meets Jonathan and he describes him as being clever if one can judge from his face. And now, my first thought when I was taking notes was, oh, he must not have read his journals if he thinks he's clever. I'm sorry, Harker. But then the next line is, his journal be true. He is also a man of great nerve. I'm like, oh, he has read the journals. So, I don't know. Clever is not the word I would use. Jonathan had been in Whitby and he was gathering the letters that had been left there and also doing some research. And now he and Mina are hard at work at putting everything together and in chronological order. They don't just have the letters and the newspaper articles, but now also the receipts that we had seen earlier, that they finally realize that all this time Dracula's headquarters had been right next door in Carfax. And the Harkers put together that Renfield's antics, which they read about in Seward's diary, line up with and give some kind of insight into Dracula's whereabouts and his movements. And Seward mentions that if Mina had never convinced him to let her transcribe his diaries, they would have never put that information together. Everyone say thank you, Mina. Just keep saying it. Seward then goes to talk to Renfield, now with new knowledge about how he is somehow connected to Dracula. Renfield is very different, calmer, more rational, and Seward is suspicious of this because he's seen his behavior turn very quickly before and leaves him be. We then see Jonathan's journal and his entries about the day before, about how he was in Whitby, gathering information, doing some digging on the deliveries that had come in on the ship, and he interviews some different people and winds up putting together that the 50 boxes that he had seen in the castle did come in. They were all deposited at Carfax, but again, he knows from Seward's entry that those two men had then taken a couple boxes out, so that's something that they're aware of and they need to look into. And after working all day, the Harkers finally succeed in their organizing and have put everything in chronological order. Good job for them. We go back to Mina's journal. She writes that she had been worried about Jonathan because working with all this and diving into it again, she feared that he would be set off and have another episode and he would be affected by what's basically his PTSD. But Jonathan seems fortified, he's determined and lively. This whole situation has kind of given him a boost. And Mina herself is excited about all this and she's just ready to like dive in with all the information. She doesn't even seem that afraid about it, to be honest. Again, she's very brave, and she even remarks that she almost feels pity for Dracula because he's so hunted, which everyone thinks hilarious. She's like, this raggedy bag of bones is gonna get his ass handed to him so hard by us. I almost feel sorry about it. Almost. She then meets for the first time Arthur and Quincy, and she feels very sad because of course it reminds her of Lucy. Quincy tells her how highly Van Helsing constantly speaks about her, and I don't know who's the bigger Mina stan, honestly, me or Van Helsing. I think I'm comfortable with us both sharing the title. I think I forgot to mention in my last video, but Van Helsing and Mina have, I think, my favorite friendship in the book. They both just hype each other up so much, and I love it. Mina also explains to them what her and Jonathan did in transcribing all of the diary entries and gathering all the extra materials and putting it together in chronological order, and she gives them their copies and is like, here basically is everything we can possibly know at this point. Power of information. Arthur is amazed and very grateful that they've done all this, and while he admits to not quite understanding everything that's going on and has happened, he was humbled by the prior experiences in the cemetery and has learned to just kind of accept the facts and roll along with things. Him and Mina have a heart-to-heart over Lucy, and it's one of the most touching moments in the book, and I like that the two characters kind of have this moment between them, because the fact that they're both just able to express these emotions, and instead of it just being all like action and horror, comes off as more real and more human for both of these people who love Lucy so much to have this connection and sit down and talk. As a reader, I appreciated it. Mina tells Arthur that she considered Lucy like a sister and hopes that she could be like a sister to him. Arthur tells her that he's felt like he's had to bottle up a lot of emotions, and so he kind of just finally lets it all out and is very appreciative of her for sitting down with him and asking him how he's doing and allowing him that space to be vulnerable, emotional, and cry and just feel. He then says that he will be like a brother to Mina. After this heart-to-heart, Mina then meets up with Quincy, and he too is not as emotional as Arthur, but she can see that he, is going through his own thing and struggling too, and so she gives him some comfort. It's very nice, and I know that from a perspective of the time period that Mina's just been giving this role of being able to comfort everyone because she's like the girl, and men can't give each other comfort, but they can find comfort in a woman because women are emotional and all that. But that being said, again, I do like that at least the men are able to express these emotions and that there is somebody who's able to comfort them. I both admire Mina and feel bad for her because she's strategist, she's researcher, she's secretary, organizer, and now she is therapist. But she's up for the task, so kudos to her. And so that brings us into our final chapter of the day, chapter 18. Mina asks Seward if she can visit Renfield. The way that Seward's just been reacting to Mina's proposal so far, I was expecting him to be like, no, of course not, that's no place for you. But he actually says there's no possible reason why she shouldn't be able to meet Renfield. And I'm like, I could think of a few reasons why a civilian should meet a patient who has been shown to not only be violent and aggressive, but also break out very easily. So Seward goes to Renfield and tells him that Mina's gonna be coming, and it's kind of funny, but also a bit disturbing, because Renfield is like, oh, sure, let me just tidy up real quick, and then he just eats all of his spiders and flies that he's apparently been collecting again. So then Mina meets him, and she greets him very pleasantly, and Renfield's response to her is, you're not the girl the doctor wanted to marry, are you? You can't be, you know, for she is dead. Renfield, we already know that he goes for the physical jugular, but now it's apparent he has no qualms going for the emotional jugular either. And Mina, she holds up very well in her meeting with Renfield, like even when he brings up her best friend's death, like she isn't shaken, she remains very pleasant and calm towards him, which I think is very impressive. Seward questions Renfield on how he knew that he wanted to marry a woman, and Renfield just talks about how everyone in the hospital, both staff and patients, love Seward. Again, he's speaking very eloquently, very rationally, and it's just this complete 180 in behavior. And it leaves Seward wondering if it has anything to do with Mina, since that's just kind of the common denominator at the moment. Renfield then eloquently explains to Mina why he's in there, that he had murderous tendencies, that he believes that consuming life would fortify his life and also extend his life. Even tells her that he tried to murder Seward. At the end of their conversation, Mina tells him that she hopes to see him again, and he says to her, goodbye, my dear. I pray God I may never see your sweet face again. And I think that's how I'm going to respond to people who annoy me from now on. Seward then picks Van Helsing up from the train station. He had been out of town, preparing to stay in London for the long haul, or for the foreseeable future rather, until they get this Dracula situation taken care of. Van Helsing then goes on and on about how smart Mina is, but that after they go over all like their paperwork at their meeting tonight, from then on they need to keep her out of everything because it'll be too much for her to bear, and vampire hunting is no business for a woman to be involved in. And it's just BS. Obviously it's sexism of the time period. I mean, part of it is them wanting to protect her, like their intentions are good, but still Mina has shown to be very brave. She's handled everything so far, and she's also, like, you just went on about how smart she is. Why would you not want somebody smart involved in your plans and the action and everything, and you're strategizing? Does not seem super smart to me. I don't think that's how you succeed. Back at the hospital, everyone then gathers together in a conference room, and it is the first time all of our main characters have been together in the same room. So that's very exciting. It's kind of like a meeting of the Avengers. You got, who would be who? Well, Quincy is the American, so he's got to be Captain America. Mina is Black Widow, not just because token woman, but also because I think they're both underestimated and stronger and smarter than people give them credit for. Arthur, Tony Stark, in the sense that he's the rich guy that's able to fund everything. I was gonna say Van Helsing could be Nick Fury, but then that would be missing an Avenger. And I would say Van Helsing is then Thor, because he's the one with knowledge of the supernatural that the other people don't have. This is actually working out a lot better than I thought. Okay. Oh my god, Seward's a doctor. I mean, Bruce is a scientist. It's not the same thing, but both men of science. There we go. That leaves Harker as Hawkeye. I just think makes sense. And I, like, even before thinking this through, I would have just put him as Hawkeye. No offense to Hawkeye, but just based on, like, stereotypes, should I say, about Hawkeye? But also, no, that works because Hawkeye and Black Widow have, like, a friendship, and then the Harkers are obviously married. That works out actually surprisingly well. I'm kind of proud of this. Anyway, back to the story. Before he really gets into it, Van Helsing asks if everybody is in for the cause, and everyone agrees, and then they all hold hands, which I guess is kind of close to the all hands in thing, but I still like to think that they all... Van Helsing gives this rousing speech talking all about vampires, how they're so strong and they're cunning, how they can control the weather and disappear at will, change forms at will. They don't have shadows, they don't have reflections, control elements and animals. They can do weird stuff with the moonlight, and also they never age. At daybreak, they must return to a coffin or the ground. How difficult they are to defeat, and how failure doesn't just mean death, but becoming one yourself. Which brings him to their advantages. They can still operate and walk around in the daytime. He explains some of the legends of vampires all around the world, and also they can only change forms at certain times. They are weak to garlic, as well as any holy items, and some other methods of defeating them. They already know the stake and everything they did to Lucy, but also putting a rose on a coffin traps a vampire in there, and also a bullet into the coffin will defeat a vampire, which is interesting. He then gives some background on the legends of the Dracula family line as well, and how the wars they fought in, and kind of the legend surrounding them. And as he's talking, Quincy at one point gets up and leaves the room, but Van Helsing just keeps going and explaining how it's important that they track down all the boxes, how if they get rid of them, then Dracula won't have any place to retreat to. And then bam, a bullet is shot through the window and into the wall. And of course, everyone just freaks out. And Arthur looks out the window, and Quincy is there, and he's like, my bad. And when he comes back up, everyone's like, Quincy, what the hell? And he explains that ever since all of this had began, and he learned that Dracula could turn into a bat, he's hated bats, and he has tried to shoot as many bats as he can find. And so he saw a bat at the window. It's like, instead of maybe opening up the window and trying to shoot out at it, I'm gonna go down to the ground where it is even further away, and I'm gonna shoot a gun into the room that I know all my friends are in. And they're gonna try to defeat Dracula. London is doomed. But then they all just continue on like nothing happened. And Van Helsing, their best course of action is to take on Dracula between the hours of noon and sunset, because that's when he's at his weakest, and they should be able to take him then. They tell Mina that she's out of the loop from now on, and she's not happy with it, but she can't convince them otherwise. And then Quincy proposes. Now they all just got done discussing about how Dracula is weakest during the daytime hours. That's going to be their best bet in defeating him. And so Quincy proposes that now, in the middle of the night, when Dracula is at his most powerful, they should go and get their hunting started right away. I can only read and shake my head. And so Mina stays in and just tries not to worry. Before they all go, Seward is called to see Renfield, and Van Helsing and Quincy and Arthur all want to meet him. Renfield, again, still pretty calm and eloquent and seems rational, asks Seward to let him release him from the prison. He meets the other men and addresses them all very kindly. He tells Arthur that he actually knew his dad. They had both been part of the same club, and how he was sorry for his loss because he was introduced as the Lord, so he knows that that means his dad had passed on. And he tells him how beloved his dad was and gives his condolences. Then he tells Quincy about how he admires Texas and sees it as a great state. And finally, he knows Van Helsing and says it's basically an honor to be meeting him and in his presence. And all the men are very taken aback by this. And Seward wants to think on his request to be released. Basically, he's like, if this behavior continues, then maybe he has been healed and he's okay. But again, he's seen his behavior change drastically before, so he wants to give it some more time. This does not appease Renfield. He says he wants to go right now, and of course Seward doesn't give in. Helsing questions Renfield a bit more. He even says that if he can provide him with an explanation on why it's so important to leave right then that night, then Van Helsing will force Seward to let him go. Don't know how Seward feels about that, but anyway. Renfield says that he can't explain why he needs to go right now because he is not in charge of himself. His master is. but that they need to trust him, and also that if they don't, whatever happens, not his fault. And now this is a tricky situation, and I will give them that. On the one hand, you know now this patient is somehow connected to Dracula. It's a keep your enemies closer type situation. You want to continue to observe him, see what you can learn from him. I get that. You don't want to just let him go. But on the other hand, you know that if you're gonna all stay in the hospital, this is gonna be Team HQ, then maybe having somebody who is controlled by your enemy in the same building, not a great idea.
Not a great plan.
Especially when he's proven that he can just escape at will, basically. You know that Dracula has supernatural powers. You don't know what abilities this man might have. Like, maybe move him off location. Can he be transferred to a different hospital or to somewhere, a more secure location, or at least move yourselves? I feel like a discussion is at least warranted on next steps. But nope, they're just like, nah, we can't let you out. See you later, bro. I'm getting a headache from all the head shaking I've been doing this chapter. Edward tries to end the visit, but Renfield even says to him, you don't need to let me go. You can keep me locked up. Just get me out of the hospital. So he's even proposing that. I feel like that in itself is a sign, or, you know, he's showing that he doesn't just want to be free. He just doesn't want to be next door to the evil creature who can control him at will. I think this is a pretty sound proposal and argument. Seward loses patience and tells him to go to bed. The men go to leave, but Renfield calls after them as they walk away. This final line, you will, I trust, Dr. Seward, do me the justice to bear in mind later on that I did what I could to convince you tonight. Bram Stoker does a really good job with the final line. When I read that, I just get like the chills, because it's like, you know that it's foreshadowing, but it's so ominous, and I love it. So that brings us to the end today. Everyone's together, they've got a plan, and we'll see them set out to do some vampire hunting. What more shenanigans they get themselves into next time. So thank you so much for watching. Have a great Monday, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.